हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू द लाइव सेशन। तो आज हम देखेंगे एनसीईआरटी हिस्ट्री क्लास 7 का चैप्टर नंबर 3 जो कि है द दिल्ली सुल्तान्स। तो शुरू करते हैं आज का चैप्टर। इन चैप्टर 2 वी सॉ दैट regions like the Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. Did you notice that there was no mention of a kingdom with Delhi as its capital? That was because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century. Take a look at Table 1. Delhi first became the capital of a kingdom under the Tomara Rajputs, who were defeated in the middle of the 12th century by the Chauhans, also referred to as Jahamanas of Ajmer. It was under the Tomaras and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. Many rich Jaina merchants lived in the city and constructed several temples. Coins minted here called Dehliwal had a wide circulation. The transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast areas of the subcontinent started with the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. Take a look at Table 1 again and identify the 5 dynasties that together made the Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultans built many cities in the area that we know as Delhi. Look at map 1 and look at Dilli-i-Kohna, Siri and Jahanapana. The rulers of Delhi. Rajput dynasties. Tomaras, Anangapala, early 12th century 1165, 1130 to 1145. Chauhans 1165 to 1192, Prithviraj Chauhan 1175 to 1192. Early Turkish rulers 1206 to 1290. Qutbuddin Aybak 1206 to 1210. Samsuddin Iltutmish 1210 to 1236, Razia 1236 to 1240, Ghiyasuddin Balban 1266 to 1287. Khalji dynasty Jalaluddin Khilji 1290 to 1296, Alauddin Khalji 1296 to 1316. Tughlaq dynasty 1320 to 1414, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq 1320 to 1324, Muhammad Tughlaq 1324 to 1351, Firoz Shah Tughlaq 1351 to 1388. Sayyid dynasty 1414 to 1451, Khizr Khan 1414 to 1421, Lodi dynasty 1451 to 1526, Bahlul Lodi 1451 to 1489. Finding out about the Delhi Sultans. Although inscriptions, coins, and architecture provide a lot of information, especially valuable are histories, Tariq singular or Tawariq plural, written in Persian, the language of administration under the Delhi Sultans. The authors of Tawariq were learned men, secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers who both recounted events and advised rulers on governance, emphasizing the importance of just rule. The Circle of Justice. Fakhr-e-Mudawwir wrote in the 13th century, "A king cannot survive without soldiers, and soldiers cannot live without salaries. Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants, but peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance." Keep the following additional details in mind. The the authors of Tawariq lived in cities, mainly Delhi, and hardly ever in villages. They often wrote their histories for sultans in the hope of rich rivers. These authors advised rulers on the need to preserve an ideal social order based on birthright and gender distinctions. Their ideas were not shared by everybody. Birthright privileges claimed on account of birth. For example, people believed that nobles inherited their rights to govern because they were born in certain families. Gender distinctions, social and biological differences between women and men. Usually, these differences are used to argue that men are superior to women. In 1236, Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia became Sultan. The counselor of the age, Minhas-e-Siraz, recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers. But he was not comfortable at having a queen as ruler. Nor were the nobles happy at her attempts to rule independently. She was removed from the throne in 1240. What Minhas-e-Siraz thought about Razia. Minhas-e-Siraz thought that the queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by God, in which women were supposed to be subordinate to men. He therefore asked, in the register of God's creation, since her account did not fall under the column of men, how did she gain from all of her excellent qualities? On her inscriptions and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. This was in contrast to the Queen Rudrama Devi, 1262 to 1289 of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, part of modern Andhra Pradesh. Rudrama Devi changed her name on her inscriptions and pretended she was a man. Another queen, Dida, ruled in Kashmir 1908 to 1003. Her title is interesting. It comes from Didi or elder sister, an obviously affectionate term given to a loved ruler by her subjects. Express Minha's ideas in your own words. Do you think Razia shared these ideas? Why do you think it was so difficult for a woman to be a ruler? From garrison town to empire, the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate. In the early 13th century, the control of the Delhi sultans rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by garrisons. The sultans seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities and were therefore dependent upon trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. Hinterland, the lands adjacent to a city or port that supply it with goods and services. Controlling garrison towns in distant Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult. Rebellion, war, even bad weather could snap fragile communication routes. Delhi's authority was also challenged by Mongol invasion from Afghanistan and by governors who rebelled at any sign of the Sultan's weakness. The Sultanate barely survived these challenges. Its consolidation occurred during the reign of Ghiyasuddin Balban and further expansion under Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Garrison Town, a fortified settlement with soldiers. The first set of campaigns along the internal frontier of the Sultanate aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of the garrison towns. During these campaigns, forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab and hunter-gatherers pastoralists expelled from their habitat. These lands were given to peasants and agriculture was encouraged. New fortresses, garrison towns, and towns were established to protect trade routes and to promote regional trade. The second expansion occurred along the external frontier of the Sultanate. Military expedition into southern India started during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and culminated with Muhammad Tughlaq. In their campaigns, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, and slaves and carried away precious metals. By the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, 150 years after somewhat humble beginnings, the armies of the Delhi Sultanate had marched across a large part of the subcontinent. They had defeated rival armies and seized cities. The Sultanate collected taxes from the peasantry and dispensed justice in its realm. But how complete and effective was its control over such a vast territory? The Masjid. A mosque is called a masjid in Arabic, literally a place where a Muslim prostrates in reverence to Allah. In a congregational mosque, masjid is a jami or jama masjid. Muslims read their prayers, namaz, together. Members of the congregation choose the most respected learned male as their leader, imam, for the rituals of prayer. He also delivers the sermon, khutbah, during the Friday prayer. During prayers, Muslims stand facing Mecca. In India, this is to the west. This is called Qibla. The Delhi Sultans built several mosques in cities all over the subcontinent. This demonstrated their claims to be protectors of Islam and Muslims. Mosques also help to create the sense of a community of believers who shared a belief system and a code of conduct. It was necessary to reinforce these ideas of community because Muslims came from a variety of backgrounds. A closer look: administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and Tughlaqs. The consolidation of a kingdom as such as the Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators. Rather than appointing aristocrats and landed chieftains as governor, the early Delhi sultans, especially Iltutmish, favored the special slaves purchased for military service called bandhagan in Persian. They were carefully trained to man some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. Since they were totally dependent upon their master, the sultan could trust and rely upon them. Slaves rather than sons. The sultans were advised: a slave whom one has brought up and promoted must be looked after, for it needs a whole lifetime and good luck to find a worthy and experienced slave. Wise men have said that a worthy and experienced slave is better than a son. Can you think of any reason why a slave would be better than a son? The Khaljis and Tughlaqs continued to use bandhagan and also raised people of humble birth who were often their clients to high political positions. They were appointed as generals and governors. However, this also introduced an element of political instability. Client: someone who is under the protection of another, a dependent or hanger on. Slaves and clients were loyal to their masters and patrons, but not to their heads. New sultans had their own servants. As a result, the accession of a new monarch often saw conflict between the old and the new nobility. The patronage of these humble people by the Delhi sultans also shocked many elites, and the authors of Persian Tabari criticized the Delhi sultans for appointing the low and base born to high offices. Officials of Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq. Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq appointed Aziz Kumar, a wine distiller, Firuz Hazam, a barber, Monka Tabak, a cook, and two gardeners, Ladha and Pira, to high administrative posts. Ziauddin Baranai, a mid-14th century chronicler, reported their appointments as a sign of Sultan's loss of political judgment and his incapacity to rule. Why do you think Baranai criticized the sultans? Like the earlier sultans, the Khalji and Tughlaq monarchs appointed the military commanders as governors of territories of varying sizes. These lands were called Ikta and their holders were called Iqtadar or Mukti. The duty of the Muktis was to lead military campaigns and maintain law and order in their Iktas. In exchange for their military services, the Muktis collected the revenues of their assignments as salary. They also paid their soldiers from these revenues. Control over muktis was most effective if their office was not inheritable and if they were assigned iktas for a short period of time before being shifted. These harsh conditions of service were rigorously imposed during the reigns of Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Accountants were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. Care was taken that the mukti collected only the taxes prescribed by the state and that he kept the required number of soldiers. As the Delhi Sultans brought the hinterland of the cities under their control, they forced the landed chieftains, the Samantha aristocrats, and rich landlords to accept their authority. Under Alauddin Khilji, the state brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under its own control. The rights of the local chieftains to levy taxes were cancelled and they were also forced to pay taxes. The Sultan's administrators measured the land and kept careful accounts. Some of the old chieftains and landlords served the Sultanate as revenue collectors and assessors. There were three types of taxes. On cultivation called kharaj and amounting to about 50% of the pigeons produce, on cattle and on houses. It is important to remember that large parts of the subcontinent remained outside the control of the Delhi Sultans. It was difficult to control distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and soon after annexing southern India, the entire region became independent. Even in the Gangetic Plain, there were forested areas that Sultanate forces could not penetrate. Local chieftains established their rule in these regions. Sometimes rulers like Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in these areas, but only for a short duration. Chieftains and their fortifications. Ibn Battuta, a 4th century traveler from Morocco, Africa, explained that chieftains sometimes fortified themselves in mountains, in rocky, uneven, and rocked places, as well as in bamboo groves. In India, the bamboo is not hollow, it is big. Its several parts are so intertwined that even fire cannot affect them, and they are on the whole very strong. The chieftains live in these forests which serve them as ramparts, inside which are their cattle and their crops. There is also water for them within, that is, rainwater which collects there. Hence, they cannot be subdued except by powerful armies who, entering these forests, cut down the bamboos with specially prepared instruments. Describe the ways in which the chieftains arranged for the defense. The Mongols under Genghis Khan invaded Transoxiana in northeast Iran in 1219 and the Delhi Sultanate faced their onslaught soon after. Mongol attacks on Delhi Sultanate increased during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule. This forced the two rulers to mobilize a large standing army in Delhi, which posed a huge administrative challenge. Let us see how the two sultans dealt with this. Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad Tughlaq. Delhi was attacked twice in 1299 or 1300 and 1302 to 1303. As a defensive measure, Alauddin Khilji raised a large standing army. The Sultanate was attacked in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign. The Mongol army was defeated. Muhammad Tughlaq was confident about the strength of his army and his resources to plan an attack on Transoxiana. He therefore raised a large standing army. Alauddin constructed a new garrison town named Siri for his soldiers. Rather than constructing a new garrison town, the oldest of the four cities of Delhi, Delhi Ekpuna, was emptied of its residents and the soldiers garrisoned there. The residents of the old city were sent to the new capital of Daulatabad in the south. The soldiers had to be fed. This was done through the produce collected as tax from lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. tax was fixed as 50% of the peasant's yield. Produce from the same area was collected as tax to feed the army, but to meet the expense of maintaining such a large number of soldiers, the Sultan levied additional taxes. This coincided with famine in the area. The soldiers had to be paid. Alauddin chose to pay his soldiers salaries in cash rather than iktas. The soldiers would buy their supplies from merchants in Delhi, and it was thus feared that merchants would raise their prices. To stop this, Alauddin controlled the prices of goods in Delhi. Prices were carefully surveyed by officers, and merchants who did not sell at the prescribed rates were punished. Muhammad Tughlaq also paid his soldiers cash salaries, but instead of controlling prices, he used a token currency, somewhat like present day paper currency, but made out of cheap metals, not gold and silver. People in the 14th century did not trust these coins. They were very smart. They saved their gold and silver coins and paid all their taxes to the state with this token currency. This cheap currency could also be counterfeited easily. Alauddin's administrative measures were quite successful, and chroniclers praised his reign for its cheap prices and efficient supply of goods in the market. He successfully withstood the threat of Mongol invasions. Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative measures were a failure. His campaign into Kashmir was a disaster. He then gave up his plans to invade Transoxania and disbanded his large army. Meanwhile, his administrative measures created complications. The shifting of people to Daulatabad was resented. The raising of taxes and famine in the Ganga Yamuna belt led to widespread rebellion, and finally, the token currency had to be recalled. In this list of Muhammad Tughlaq's failures, we sometimes forget that for the first time in the history of the Sultanate, a Delhi Sultan planned a campaign to capture Mongol territory. Unlike Alauddin's defensive measures, Muhammad Tughlaq's measures were conceived as part of military offensive against the Mongols. The Sultanate in the 15th and 16th centuries. Take a look at table 1 again. You will notice that after the Tughlaqs, the Sayyid and Lodi dynasties ruled from Delhi and Agra until 1526. By then, Jaunpur, Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and the entire South India had independent rulers who established flourishing states and prosperous capitals. This was also the period which saw the emergence of new ruling groups like the Afghans and the Rajputs. Some of the states established in this period were small but powerful and extremely well administered. Sher Shah Sur started his career as the manager of a small territory for his uncle in Bihar and eventually challenged and defeated the Mughal Emperor Humayun 1530 to 1540, 1555 to 1556. Sher Shah captured Delhi and established his own dynasty. Although the Sur dynasty ruled for only 15 years, it introduced an administration that borrowed elements from Alauddin Khilji and made them more efficient. Sher Shah's administration became the model followed by the great Emperor Akbar when he consolidated the Mughal Empire. Elsewhere, the three orders and the peace of God, Knights and the Crusades. The idea of the three orders was first formulated in France in the early 11th century. It divided society into three classes: those who prayed, those who fought, and those who tilled the land. This division of society into three orders was supported by the church to consolidate its dominant role in the society. This helped the emergence of a new warrior group called knights. The church patronized this group and used them to propagate their idea of peace of God. The attempt was to direct warriors away from conflict among themselves and send them instead on a campaign against the Muslims who had captured the city of Jerusalem. This led to a series of campaigns called the Crusades. These campaigns in the service of God and the church completely altered the status of knights. Originally, these knights did not belong to the class of nobles, But by the end of the 11th century in France, a century later in Germany, the humble origins of these warriors were forgotten. By the 12th century, nobles also wanted to be known as knights. तो ये है इस चैप्टर का एक्सरसाइज। तो इसके बाद अभी हम देखेंगे चैप्टर 4 द मुगल एम्पायर। तो शुरू करते हैं ये चैप्टर। Ruling as large a territory as the Indian subcontinent with such a diversity of people and cultures was an extremely difficult task for any ruler to accomplish in the Middle Ages. Quite in contrast to their predecessors, the Mughals created an empire and accomplished what had hitherto seemed possible for only short periods of time. From the latter half of the 16th century, they expanded the kingdom from Agra and Delhi until in the 17th century they controlled nearly all of the subcontinent. They imposed structures of administration and ideas of governance that outlasted their rule, leaving a political legacy that succeeding rulers of the subcontinent could not ignore. Today, the Prime Minister of India addresses the nation on Independence Day from the ramparts of the Red Fort in Delhi, the residence of the Mughal emperors. Who were the Mughals? The Mughals were descendants of two great lineages of rulers. From their mother's sides, they were descendants of Genghis Khan, died 1227, the Mongol ruler who ruled over parts of China and Central Asia. From their father's side, they were the successor of Timur, died 1404, the ruler of Iran, Iraq, and modern day Turkey. However, the Mughals did not like to be called Mughal or Mongol. This was because Genghis Khan's memory was associated with the massacre of innumerable people. It was also linked with the Uzbeks, their Mongol competitors. On the other hand, the Mughals were proud of their Timurid ancestry, not least of all because their greatest ancestor had captured Delhi in 1398. They celebrated their genealogy pictorially, each ruler getting a picture made of Timur and himself. Take a look at figure 2, which is somewhat like a group photograph. Mughal military campaigns. Babur, the first Mughal emperor 1526 to 1530, succeeded to the throne of Fargana in 1494 when he was only 12 years old. He was forced to leave his ancestral throne due to the invasion of another Mongol group, the Uzbeks. After years of wandering, he seized Kabul in 1504. In 1526, he defeated the Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi, at Panipat and captured Delhi and Agra. Table 1 charts some of the major campaigns of the Mughals. Study it carefully and see if you can notice any long-term patterns. You will notice, for example, that the Afghans were an immediate threat to Mughal authority. Note that Note the relationship between the Mughals and the Ahoms, the Sikhs, and Mewar and Marwar. How was Humayun's relationship with Safavid Iran different from Akbar's? Did the annexation of Golconda and Bijapur in Aurangzeb's reign and hostilities in the Deccan? Gunpowder technology was brought to India for warfare in the 14th century. Firearms were used for the first time in regions such as Gujarat, Malwa, and Deccan and was used by Babur in early 16th century. Mughal emperors, major campaigns and events. Babur 1526 to 1530. 1526 defeated Ibrahim Lodi and his Afghan supporters at Panipat. 1527 defeated Rana Sangha Rajput rulers and allies at Khanwa. 1528 defeated the Rajputs at Chanderi, established control over Agra and Delhi before his death. Humayun 1530 to 1540, 1555 to 1556. Humayun divided his inheritance according to the will of his father. His brothers were each given a province. The ambition of his brother Mirza Kamran weakened Humayun's cause against Afghan competitors. Sher Shah defeated Humayun at Chausa 1539 and Kannauj 1540, forcing him to flee to Iran. In Iran, Humayun received help from Safavid Shah. He recaptured Delhi in 1555 but died the next year after an accident in this building. Akbar 1556 to 1605. Akbar was 13 years old when he became emperor. His reign can be divided into three periods: 1556 to 1570. Akbar became independent of the regent Bairam Khan and other members of his domestic staff. Military campaigns were launched against the Sudis and other Afghans, against the neighboring kingdoms of Malwa and Gondwana, and to suppress the revolt of his half-brother Mirza Hakim and the Uzbeks. In 1568, the Sisodia capital of Chittor was seized, and in 1569 Ranthambore. 1570 to 1585. Military campaigns in Gujarat were followed by campaigns in the east in Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa. These campaigns were complicated by the 1579 to 1580 revolt in support of Mirza Hakim. 1585 to 1605. Expansion of Akbar's empire. Campaigns were launched in the northwest. Kandahar was seized from the Safavids. Kashmir was annexed, as also Kabul after the death of Mirza Hakim. Campaigns in the Deccan started, and Berar, Khandesh, and parts of Ahmednagar were annexed. In the last years of his reign, Akbar was distracted by the rebellion of Prince Salim, the future Emperor Jahangir. Jahangir, 1605 to 1627. Military campaigns started by Akbar continued. The Sisodia ruler of Mewar, Amar Singh, accepted Mughal service. Less successful campaigns against the Sikhs, the Ahoms, and Ahmednagar followed. Prince Khurram, the future Emperor Shah Jahan, rebelled in the last years of his reign. The efforts of Nur Jahan, Jahangir's wife, to marginalize him were unsuccessful. Shah Jahan, 1627 to 1658. Mughal campaigns continued in the Deccan under Shah Jahan. The Afghan noble Khan Jahan Lodi rebelled and was defeated. Campaigns were launched against Ahmednagar. The Bundelas were defeated and Orcha seized. In the northwest, the campaign to seize Balkh from the Uzbeks was unsuccessful and Kandahar was lost to the Safavids. In 1632, Ahmednagar was finally annexed and the Bijapur forces sued for peace. In 1657 to 1658, there was conflict over succession among Shah Jahan's son Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was victorious and his three brothers, including Dara Sukho, were killed. Shah Jahan was imprisoned for the rest of his life in Agra. Aurangzeb, 1658 to 1707. In the northeast, the Ahoms were defeated in 1663 but rebelled again in 1680s. Campaigns in the northwest against the Yusufzai and the Sikhs were temporarily successful. Mughal intervention in the succession and internal politics of the Rathore Rajputs of Marwar led to the rebellion. Campaigns against the Maratha chieftain Shivaji were initially successful, but Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji, who escaped from Agra, declared himself an independent king, and resumed his campaign against the Mughals. Prince Akbar rebelled against Aurangzeb and received support from the Marathas and the Deccan Sultanate. He finally fled to Safavid Iran. After Akbar's rebellion, Aurangzeb sent armies against the Deccan Sultanates. Bijapur was annexed in 1685 and Golconda in 1687. From 1698, Aurangzeb personally managed the campaigns in the Deccan against the Marathas, who started guerrilla warfare. Aurangzeb also had to face the rebellion in North India of the Sikhs, Jats, and Satnamis, in the northeast of the Ahoms, and in the Deccan of the Marathas. His death was followed by a succession conflict amongst his sons. Mughal traditions of succession. The Mughals did not believe in the rule of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited his father's estate. Instead, they followed the Mughal and Timurid custom of co-parental inheritance, or a division of the inheritance amongst all the sons. Follow the highlighted passages in Table 1 and note the evidence for rebellions by Mughal princes. Which do you think is fairer? Division of inheritance, primogeniture, or co-parental? Mughal relations with other rulers. Take a look at Table 1 once again. You will notice that the Mughal rulers campaigned constantly against rulers who refused to accept their authority. But as the Mughals became powerful, many other rulers also joined them voluntarily. The Rajputs are a good example of this. Many of them married their daughters into Mughal families and received high position, but many resisted as well. Mughal marriages with the Rajputs. The mother of Jahangir was a Kachhawa princess, daughter of the Rajput ruler of Amber, modern-day Jaipur. The mother of Shahjahan was a Rathore princess, daughter of the Rajput ruler of Marwar, Jodhpur. The Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar refused to accept Mughal authority for a long time. Once defeated, however, they were honorably treated by the Mughals, given their lands, Watan, Beg as assignments, Watan Jagir. The careful balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled the Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. But it was difficult to keep this balance all the time. Look at Table 1 again. Note that Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji when he came to accept Mughal authority. What was the consequence of this insult? Mansabdas and Jagirdas. As the empire expanded to encompass different regions, the Mughals recruited diverse bodies of peoples. From a small nucleus of Turkish nobles to Turans, they expanded to include Iranians, Indian, Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, and other groups. Those who joined Mughal service were enrolled as Mansabdas. The term Mansabdar refers to an individual who holds a mansab, meaning a position or rank. It was a grading system used by the Mughals to fix rank, salary, and military responsibilities. Rank and salary were determined by a numerical value called jat. The higher the jat, the more prestigious was the noble's position in court and larger his salary. Jat ranking. Nobles with a jat of 5,000 were ranked higher than those of 1,000. In Akbar's reign, there were 29 Mansabdar with a rank of 5,000 jat. By Aurangzeb's reign, the number of Mansabdars had increased to 79. Would this have meant more expenditure for the state? The Mansabdar's military responsibilities required him to maintain a specified number of savar or cavalrymen. The Mansabdar brought his cavalrymen for review, got them registered, their horses branded, and then received money to pay them as salary. Mansabdars received their salaries as revenue assignments called jagirs, which were somewhat like iktas. But unlike muktis, most Mansabdars did not actually reside in or administer their jagirs. They only had rights to the revenue of their assignments, which was collected for them by their servants, while the Mansabdars themselves served in some part of the country. In Akbar's reign, these jagirs were carefully assessed so that their revenues were roughly equal to the salary of the Mansabdar. By Aurangzeb's reign, this was no longer the case, and the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. There was also a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars, which meant a long wait before they received a Jagir. These and other factors created a shortage in the number of Jagirs. As a result, many Jagirdars tried to extract as much revenue as possible while they had a Jagir. Aurangzeb was unable to control these developments in the last year of his reign, and the peasantry therefore suffered tremendously. Jabt and Jamindars. The main source of income available to Mughal rulers was tax on the produce of the peasantry. In most places, peasants paid taxes through the rural elites, that is, the headman or the local chieftain. The Mughals used one term, Jamindars, to describe all intermediaries, whether they were local headmen or villages or powerful chieftains. Akbar's revenue minister Todarmal carried out a careful survey of crop yields, prices, and areas cultivated for a 10-year period, 1570 to 1580. On the basis of this data, tax was fixed on each crop in case. Each province was divided into revenue circles with its own schedule of revenue rates for individual crops. This revenue system was known as Jabt. It was prevalent in those areas where Mughal administrators could survey the land and keep very careful accounts. This was not possible in provinces such as Gujarat and Bengal. In some areas, the Jamindars exercised a great deal of power. The exploitation by Mughal administrators could drive them to rebellion. Sometimes Jamindars and peasants of the same caste allied in rebelling against Mughal authority. These peasants' revolts challenged the stability of the Mughal Empire from the end of the 17th century. Akbarnama and N.A. Akbari. Akbar ordered one of his close friends and courtiers, Abul Fazl, to write a history of his reign. Abul Fazl wrote three-volume history of Akbar's reign titled Akbarnama. The first volume dealt with Akbar's ancestors, and the second volume recorded the events of Akbar's reign. The third volume is the N.A. Akbari. It deals with Akbar's administration, household, army, the revenues, and the geography of his empire. It also provides rich details about the traditions and culture of the people living in India. The most interesting aspect about the N.A. Akbari is its rich statistical details about things as diverse as crops, yields, prices, wages, and revenues. A closer look, Akbar's policies. The broad features of administration were laid down by Akbar and were elaborately discussed by Abul Fazl in his book The Akbarnama, in particular in its last volume, the N.A. Akbari. Abul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces called subas, governed by a subadar, who carried out both political and military functions. Each province also had a financial officer or diwan. For the maintenance of peace and order in his province, the subadar was supported by other officers such as military paymaster Bakshi, the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage, Sadr, military commanders Fauzdars, and the town police commander Kotwal. Nur Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court. Meherunisa married the Emperor Jahangir in 1611 and received the title Nur Jahan. She remained extremely loyal and supportive to the monarch. As a mark of honor, Jahangir struck silver coins bearing his own titles on one side and on the other the inscription struck in the name of the Queen Begum Nur Jahan. The adjoining document is an order Farman of Nur Jahan. The square seal states, "Command of Her Most Sublime and Elevated Majesty Nur Jahan Shah Begum." The round seal states, "By the son of Shah Jahangir, she became as brilliant as the moon. May Nur Jahan Shah be the lady of the age." Akbar's nobles commanded large armies and had access to large amounts of revenue. While they were loyal, the empire functioned efficiently. But by the end of the 17th century, many nobles had built independent networks of their own. Their loyalties to the empire were weakened by their own self interest. While Akbar was at Fatehpur Sikri during the 1570s, he started discussion on religion with the ulama, Brahmanas, Jesuit priests who were Roman Catholics, and Zoroastrians. These discussions took place in the Ibadat Khana. He was interested in the religion and social custom of different peoples. Akbar's interaction with people of different faiths made him realize that religious scholars who emphasized ritual and dogma were often bigots. Their teaching created divisions and disharmony amongst his subjects. This eventually led Akbar to the idea of sul-e-kul or universal peace. This idea of tolerance did not discriminate between people of different religions in his realm. Instead, it focused on a system of ethics, honesty, justice, peace that was universally applicable. Abul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around this idea of sul-e-kul. This principle of governance was followed by Jahangir and Shahjahan as well. Dogma, a statement or an interpretation declared as authoritative with the expectation that it would be followed without question by God, and in an individual who is intolerant of another person's religious beliefs or culture. Sul-e-kul. Jahangir, Akbar's son, described his father's policy of Sul-e-kul in the following words. As in wide expanse of the divine compassion, there is room for all classes and the followers of all creeds. So, in his imperial dominance, which on all sides were limited only by the sea, there was room for the professors of opposite religions or for beliefs, good and bad, and the road to intolerance was closed. Sunnis and Shias met in one mosque and Christians and Jews in one church to pray. He consistently followed the principle of universal peace, sul-e-kul. Akbar commissioned the translation of many Sanskrit words into Persian. A Maktab Khana or translation bureau was also established at Fatehpur Sikri for this purpose. The Mahabharata, Ramayana, Leelavati, and Yoga Vasisht were some of the notable Sanskrit works that were taken off for translation. The Rajmanamha, Persian translation of the Mahabharata, contains lavish illustration of the events of Mahabharata. The Mughal Empire in the 17th century and after. The administrative and military efficiency of the Mughal Empire led to great economic and commercial prosperity. International travelers described it as the fabled land of wealth. But these same visitors were also appalled at the state of poverty that existed side by side with the greatest opulence. The inequalities were glaring. Documents from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's reign inform us that the highest ranking Mansabdars were only 445 in number out of a total of 8,000. This small number, a mere 5.6% of the total number of Mansabdars, received 61.5% of the total estimated revenue of the empire as salaries for themselves and their troopers. The Mughal emperors and their Mansabdars spent a great deal of their income on salaries and goods. This expenditure benefited the artisans and peasantry who supplied them with goods and produce. But the scale of revenue collection left very little for investment in the hands of the primary producers, the peasant and the artisan. The poorest among them lived from hand to mouth and they could hardly consider investing in additional resources, tools and supplies to increase productivity. The wealthier peasantry and artisanal groups, the merchants and bankers profited in this economic world. The enormous wealth and resources commanded by Mughal elite made them an extremely powerful group of people in the late 17th century. As the authority of the Mughal emperors slowly declined, his servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. They constituted new dynasties and held command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh. Although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master, by the 18th century the provinces of the empire had consolidated their independent political identities. We will read more about them in chapter 10. Elsewhere, kings and queens. There were several great monarchs, all near contemporaries, in different parts of the world in the 16th century. These included the ruler of Ottoman Turkey, Sultan Suleiman 1520 to 1566. During his rule, the Ottoman state expanded into Europe, seizing Hungary and besieging Austria. His armies also seized Baghdad and Iraq. Much of North Africa, all the way into Morocco, acknowledged Ottoman authority. Suleiman also reconstructed the Ottoman navy. Its domination over the eastern Mediterranean brought the navy into competition with Spain. In the Arabian Sea, it challenged the Portuguese. The monarch was given the title of Al Qanuni, the lawgiver, because of the large number of regulations Qanun passed during his reign. These were aimed to standardize administrative procedures throughout the expanding domains of the empire and specifically to protect the peasantry from forced labor and extraordinary taxes. Later in the 17th century, when public order declined in the Ottoman domains, the reign of Suleiman Kanuni was remembered as a period of idle governance. Find out more about Akbar's other contemporaries. The ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603, the Safavid ruler of Iran, Shah Abbas, 1588 to 1629, and the more controversial Russian ruler, Tsar Ivan IV Vasilevich, also called Ivan the Terrible, 1530 to 1584. तो इसी के साथ ये चैप्टर भी कंप्लीट होता है और ये है इस चैप्टर का एक्सरसाइज। तो अगर आपको डेली लाइव क्लास ज्वाइन करना है तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और नोटिफिकेशन आइकन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए और वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो लाइक कर दीजिए। तो हमारा आज का चैप्टर यहीं तक था। तो आज का सेशन हमारा यहीं पे ख़त्म होता है। थैंक यू, थैंक्स फॉर ज्वाइनिंग।